The gentle hum of the Aegis's engines provided a comforting backdrop to the otherwise tense atmosphere in the grand banquet hall. The research vessel, currently docked at the edge of the Intergalactic Alliance's territory, had been transformed overnight from a utilitarian space exploration craft into a diplomatic marvel. Holographic displays of Earth's most impressive landscapes adorned the walls, while the central table, a massive oval of synthesized mahogany, practically groaned under the weight of delicacies from dozens of worlds. Captain Elena Maris stood at the entrance, straightening her dress uniform for what must have been the 10th time in as many minutes. As both the commanding officer of the Aegis and Earth's senior diplomatic representative at this gathering, the pressure weighing on her shoulders felt heavier than standard gravity. "Final checks on the translation modules?" she asked, not taking her eyes off the elaborate place settings. Behind her, Communications Officer Leon nodded. "All systems nominal, Captain. The semi-automated translation should handle most idiomatic expressions, with only a 3% error margin." "That's still too high for comfort," Elena muttered, remembering the disastrous Centauri incident, where a mistranslated greeting had nearly started an interstellar conflict. "Have the backup interpreters standing by." The doors at the far end of the hall parted, and Elena straightened her posture as the first delegates began to enter. This wasn't just any diplomatic function. It was the first time Earth had been granted hosting privileges for a Star Systems Alliance conference. Representatives from 27 different civilizations would be present, many of whom still viewed humanity as the impulsive newcomers to the galactic community. Elena had spent months studying the proper dining etiquette for each species. The Varda used specialized vibrating utensils that required precise handling. The aquatic Moraeans needed specially designed dining apparatus to consume food outside their water environments. And the Xyrons, well, the Xyrons were notoriously difficult to please, with cultural sensitivities that seemed to shift with each diplomatic encounter. As the delegates took their assigned places, positions that had been calculated with the precision of a stellar cartographer to avoid any perceived insults of hierarchy, Elena allowed herself a small smile. Perhaps they would make it through the introductory banquet without incident after all. The first course was served by hovering drones, programmed with the exact serving protocols for each species. Elena watched nervously as the dishes were placed before the delegates. To her relief, each representative seemed pleased with the presentation, particularly the Xyron ambassador, whose upper appendages quivered in what Elena recognized as a sign of approval. Following protocol, Elena waited until all guests had been served before lifting her own utensils. She had chosen to demonstrate Earth's cultural diversity by using chopsticks rather than the standard fork and knife. A subtle reminder that humanity itself was not monolithic in its customs. The room fell into that peculiar rhythm of communal dining, punctuated by the soft clicks of utensils and the occasional satisfied murmur. Conversation flowed surprisingly well, with delegates discussing recent astronomical phenomena and the promising new trade routes opened in the Andromeda sector. It was the Xyron ambassador who broke the pleasant atmosphere. The tall, willowy being with iridescent skin turned its multifaceted eyes toward Elena and asked through the translator, "Captain Maris, I notice a peculiar behavior among your human delegation. Why are you consuming food solely with your right hand?" The question, seemingly innocuous, sent a chill down Elena's spine. She carefully set down her chopsticks, buying herself a moment to think. This wasn't just idle curiosity. In diplomatic circles, such pointed questions rarely were. "An interesting observation, Ambassador," she replied, keeping her voice even. "Humans have various customs regarding dining. Some cultures traditionally use only the right hand for eating, while others have no such distinction." The Xyron's skin rippled, a sign Elena couldn't quite interpret. "Yet I observe that all humans present are utilizing their right appendages. even when your anatomical structure clearly indicates bilateral functionality. Elena glanced around the table and realized with a start that the ambassador was correct. Every human diplomat was indeed using their right hand predominantly, whether with chopsticks, forks, or the finger foods provided for certain courses. A coincidence, perhaps, she offered, but the damage was done. Other delegates were now watching the exchange with interest, and Elena could practically feel the diplomatic temperature of the room shifting. The Varda representative leaned forward, her crystalline exoskeleton catching the light. In our society, designating one appendage as superior to its counterpart would be considered deeply offensive to our philosophy of balance. While among the Telosians, added another delegate, food must never touch the fifth digit of either manipulator, regardless of dominance. What had begun as a simple question was rapidly evolving into a complex cultural discussion. Precisely the kind of diplomatic minefield Elena had hoped to avoid on this first night. "If I may," she said, raising her voice slightly to regain control of the conversation. "I believe we're touching on a fascinating aspect of cross-species communication. Perhaps we could explore this topic more thoroughly in tomorrow's cultural exchange session, where we can give it the attention it deserves." But the Zyron ambassador was not to be deterred. "We Zyrons revere the left manipulator as the appendage of truth and honor. Your avoidance of it suggests a concerning cultural bias that was not mentioned in your species' application to the Alliance." Murmurs rippled through the gathered delegates. Elena fought to maintain her composure as she realized the gravity of the situation. What had seemed like a trivial observation about human dining habits was rapidly transforming into a potential diplomatic incident. "Ambassador," she said carefully, "I assure you there is no intentional slight meant by our hand preference. Human physiology simply tends toward right-hand dominance for approximately 90% of our population." "A genetic deficiency, then?" asked the Marian delegate, their voice bubbling through their hydration apparatus. Elena felt a flash of indignation. Not a deficiency, but a natural variation, much like the chromatic diversity in Zyron skin or the crystalline composition differences among the Varda. She could see her diplomatic team shifting uncomfortably in their seats. This was not how the evening was supposed to progress. "Perhaps," Elena continued, trying to redirect the conversation, "we might all benefit from learning more about each other's dining customs. After all, that's one of the purposes of this gathering, to deepen our mutual understanding." But the damage had been done. The simple question about hand dominance had opened a door to doubts and misconceptions that threatened to undermine months of careful diplomatic preparation. As the meal continued with noticeably cooled enthusiasm, Elena made eye contact with her communications officer and subtly signaled for an emergency briefing to be arranged immediately after the banquet. What had begun as Earth's proud moment in the interstellar spotlight was rapidly becoming a potential diplomatic disaster. They would need to address this right-hand question head-on, and quickly, before it escalated from dinner-table curiosity to a full-blown interspecies incident. Elena paced the confines of the Aegis's conference room, her dinner uniform exchanged for the more comfortable standard duty attire. Around the oval table sat her hastily assembled crisis team: Communications Officer Leon, Cultural Attaché Garcia, and Dr. Cato Wren, the ship's historical consultant. "Of all the possible complications," Elena said, running a hand through her short hair, "I never imagined our dominant hand preference would become a diplomatic flashpoint." Dr. Wren adjusted his spectacles, an anachronistic affectation he maintained despite having undergone corrective procedures years ago. "Actually, Captain, hand dominance has been a culturally significant marker throughout human history. I'm surprised we didn't anticipate this question." Elena stopped her pacing. "Elaborate, Doctor." The historian activated the room's holographic display, and images from Earth's past materialized in the center of the table. Hand symbolism appears across nearly all human cultures, he explained. The right hand has traditionally been associated with positive attributes: righteousness, skill, honor. The Latin word dexter, meaning right, gave us terms like dexterity. Meanwhile, sinister originally referred to the left side. So there is a bias, Elena said grimly. A historical one. Yes, Dr. Wren confirmed. Many cultures considered the left hand unclean, particularly in societies where it was used for hygiene purposes. Religious texts often place the righteous at God's right hand, while the damned are sent to the left. Communications Officer Leon frowned. But surely we've moved beyond such superstitions. Culturally, perhaps, Garcia interjected. But biologically, right-hand dominance remains prevalent in humans. Approximately 85–90% of our species is right-handed, a trait that has remained consistent throughout our recorded history. Elena resumed her pacing. The Xiron ambassador specifically mentioned that this wasn't disclosed in our alliance application. Could this be considered a form of deception? Unlikely, Dr. Wren replied. Hand dominance would have been considered too trivial to include in the biological overview. We documented our bilateral symmetry and manual dexterity, but specific population distributions of traits like handedness would have been relegated to appendices that few representatives would have bothered to examine. Well, they're examining it now, Elena said. And worse, the Xyrons apparently revere the left hand as their appendage of truth and honor. Our predominantly right-handed species must look like we're deliberately snubbing their values. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Earth's admission to the Star Systems Alliance had been controversial from the start, with several member species arguing that humans were too aggressive, too unpredictable, and too culturally immature to join the interstellar community. This handedness issue could easily become symbolic of humanity's perceived arrogance and unwillingness to adapt to galactic norms. We need to understand exactly what the Xyrons believe about handedness, Elena decided. And we need to compile a comprehensive explanation of our own hand dominance, both the biological basis and the cultural history. I'll prepare a historical briefing, Dr. Wren offered, including the evolution of handedness in primates and the neurological basis for dominance. Good, Elena nodded. Garcia, I want you to research Xiron cultural beliefs surrounding their appendages. Work with the linguistics team to ensure we're not missing any nuances in translation. Already on it, Captain, the cultural attaché responded, fingers flying across his datapad. And Leon, Elena continued, monitor the interstellar news feeds. I want to know if this is already becoming a story. The communications officer grimaced. Too late for that, Captain. Take a look. She projected a holographic display of headlines from various Alliance news sources. Earth diplomats snub Xiron traditions with right-handed dining. Human right superiority raises questions about species readiness for Alliance membership. Cultural insensitivity or biological constraint, the human hand controversy. Elena felt a headache forming behind her eyes. Wonderful. We're trending on the interstellar news feeds, and not in a good way. It gets worse, Leon added reluctantly. Some publications are using this as a metaphor for humanity's approach to galactic politics. There's an opinion piece suggesting that our right-hand dominance symbolizes our inability to embrace truly alien perspectives. That's absurd, Elena snapped. We can't change our neurological wiring to satisfy diplomatic niceties. No, Dr. Wren agreed. But we can contextualize it. Human history is full of examples where we've elevated our biological constraints into cultural strengths. Elena considered this for a moment. So we don't deny our right-hand dominance. We explain it within a cultural and biological framework that the Alliance can understand. Precisely. Dr. Wren nodded. And perhaps we highlight the cultural significance of the left hand in certain human traditions. The Boy Scouts' left-handed handshake, for instance, which originated from the practice of holding one's shield with the left hand. So extending that hand was a gesture of trust. I like that approach, Elena said, feeling a spark of hope. We acknowledge our biological reality while demonstrating that we're not culturally bound by it. Captain, Garcia interrupted, looking up from his research. You should know that the Zyron reverence for the left manipulator stems from their unique physiology. Their heart equivalent organ is located beneath their left arm cluster. Offering the left appendage in greeting or using it to handle food is literally offering access to their most vulnerable point, a supreme gesture of trust. Elena absorbed this information. So when they see us consistently favoring our right hands, they interpret it as a deliberate withholding of trust, Garcia confirmed. A constant, subtle message that we're keeping our guard up. The implications were profound. What humans saw as a neutral biological trait, the Zyrons interpreted as a deeply meaningful cultural choice, one that directly contradicted their most fundamental values. This is precisely why cross-species diplomacy is so challenging. Elena sighed. We're not just translating words. We're translating the meaning behind physical behaviors that evolved on different worlds. She stood straight, decision made. Tomorrow's cultural exchange session will now focus primarily on this issue. Dr. Wren, I want a comprehensive presentation on human-handedness, biological, historical, and cultural. Garcia, work with the Zyron Cultural Liaison to ensure we're addressing their specific concerns. And Leon, prepare a media strategy to counter the negative press. As the team dispersed to their tasks, Elena remained in the conference room, staring at the still active display of interstellar headlines. What had begun as a simple dinner question had escalated into a potential diplomatic crisis that threatened Earth's standing in the galactic community. She needed to turn this around, not just for the sake of this conference, but for humanity's future among the stars. The morning brought no relief from the diplomatic tensions. Elena reviewed the night's developments with growing concern as she prepared for the day's sessions. The Alliance's central hub was buzzing with discussions about the human hand controversy, and several delegations had requested private clarification meetings before the main cultural exchange. Captain, Leon reported, hurrying to match Elena's brisk pace down the corridor. The Varda ambassador has formally requested that all human delegates demonstrate ambidextrous eating at tonight's dinner. Elena nearly stopped in her tracks. That's absurd. We can't suddenly train everyone to eat with their non-dominant hand overnight. I conveyed as much, Leon replied. But the Varda insist that a species unwilling to adapt even in small ways cannot truly embrace the Alliance's principles of mutual accommodation. The pressure was mounting, and Elena could feel Earth's carefully cultivated diplomatic position eroding with each passing hour. They needed more than explanations now. They needed a compelling narrative that would transform this perceived weakness into a demonstration of human adaptability. When she entered the preparation room for the cultural exchange session, Elena found Dr. Wren surrounded by holographic displays of human history. Images of ancient paintings, early tools, and archaeological sites floated around him like a constellation of humanity's past. Please tell me you found something we can use, Elena said without preamble. The historian looked up, his expression brightening. Captain, I believe I have. Look at this. He gestured, and the holographic display rearranged to highlight a particular image, a flag of blue background with a brown left hand prominently displayed. The Interplanetary Unity flag, Dr. Wren explained. Adopted over a century ago when humanity first established permanent colonies beyond Earth. Notice the symbolism, a left hand, palm forward, against a blue background representing our oceans. Elena studied the image. I'm familiar with the flag, Doctor, but I don't see how this helps our current situation. Because of the specific symbolism, he replied eagerly. The left hand was deliberately chosen for this emblem precisely because of its historical underrepresentation. The designers wanted to symbolize humanity, putting aside old biases and embracing new perspectives as we reach for the stars. Elena felt the first stirrings of hope. So our most recognized interplanetary symbol actually features the left hand? Exactly, Dr. Wren confirmed. And there's more. The gesture itself, left hand, palm forward, has significance across human cultures. It represents openness, transparency, showing that one carries no weapons. In many ancient warrior cultures, the shield was carried in the left hand, so lowering it exposed the heart, a gesture of ultimate trust. The parallel to Zyran physiology was striking. Without knowing it, humanity had created a symbol that resonated perfectly with Zyran values. This is exactly what we need, Elena decided. Not a denial of our biological reality, but evidence that we've culturally elevated the left hand in our most important interstellar symbol. She turned to Leon. Incorporate this into today's presentation, and make sure the interplanetary unity flag is prominently displayed during the cultural exchange. As the time for the formal session approached, Elena felt both nervous and cautiously optimistic. They had a compelling story to tell, one that acknowledged humanity's biological handedness, while demonstrating their cultural evolution beyond it. The Grand Assembly Hall of the Alliance Space Station was arranged in concentric circles, with each delegation seated at equal distance from the central podium, a physical manifestation of the Alliance's commitment to equality among member species. As Elena took her place at the podium, she could feel the weight of attention from representatives of 27 different civilizations. Distinguished delegates, she began, her voice steady despite her inner tension. Yesterday at our welcoming banquet, an important question was raised about human-handedness and its cultural implications. Rather than view this as a diplomatic challenge, I'd like to thank the Zyran delegation for providing us with this opportunity to explore the fascinating intersection of biology, culture, and interspecies understanding. She nodded to Leon, who activated the holographic display. The image of human brain scans appeared above the assembly. Humans, like many bilateral species, display a phenomenon called lateral dominance. Approximately 85–90% of our population shows a natural preference for using their right hand for fine motor tasks, a trait linked to the hemispheric specialization of our brains. The display shifted to show ancient human tools and artifacts. This dominance pattern has been consistent throughout our recorded history, as evidenced by archaeological findings dating back hundreds of thousands of years. But while this biological reality shaped our early development, our cultural interpretation of handedness has evolved significantly. Elena could see the Zyran ambassador watching intently, their iridescent skin shifting colors in what she hoped was a sign of interest rather than continued offense. In many early human cultures, the right hand became associated with positive attributes, while the left was often relegated to less honored tasks. These associations became embedded in our languages and customs, creating biases that persisted for millennia. Murmurs rippled through the assembly as the translation systems conveyed this acknowledgement of human cultural bias. However, Elena continued, her voice strengthening, human culture is not static. As we evolved socially and intellectually, we began to recognize and challenge these biases. We came to understand that biological variance is not a deficiency, but a natural expression of diversity, a principle I believe all members of this alliance can appreciate. She nodded again to Leon, and the display changed to show the interplanetary unity flag, the blue background with the brown left hand prominently displayed. This is humanity's chosen symbol for our venture into the stars, our interplanetary unity flag. Notice that it features the left hand, not the right, deliberately challenging our historical biases. The hand is shown palm forward, fingers extended, a gesture that across human cultures symbolizes openness, peace, and trust. Elena paused, allowing the significance to register with the assembled delegates. In many ancient warrior traditions, the shield was carried in the left hand. To lower that shield and extend the left hand exposed one's heart, the ultimate gesture of vulnerability and trust. When humans designed this flag, they chose the left hand precisely because it represented moving beyond our past limitations and offering our truest selves to the universe. She could see the ripple of reaction spreading through the assembly. The Varda delegates were conferring among themselves, crystal exoskeletons catching the light as they gestured animatedly. The Morayan representatives' hydration apparatuses bubbled with increased activity, a sign of emotional engagement. Most importantly, the Zyron ambassador's skin had shifted to a deep purple hue, a color Elena recognized from her cultural briefings as indicating profound interest or respect. Distinguished delegates, Elena continued, humanity acknowledges our biological tendency toward right-handedness. We do not deny this aspect of our physical nature, but we ask you to consider that a species should be judged not merely by its biological constraints, but by how it culturally interprets and evolves beyond those constraints. She gestured to the flag still displayed above the assembly. When humanity reached for the stars, we chose to reach with our left hand, the hand that throughout much of our history had been considered lesser. We transformed what some might see as a limitation into a symbol of our commitment to growth, inclusion, and new perspectives. The assembly hall had fallen completely silent, a rarity in gatherings of such diverse species, with their varying comfort requirements and communication styles. I believe this embodies the very spirit of the Star Systems Alliance, the recognition that our different evolutionary paths need not divide us, but can instead enrich our shared future among the stars. Elena was prepared to continue, but the Zyron ambassador rose from their seat, an unexpected breach of protocol that sent a ripple of surprise through the assembly. Captain Maris, the ambassador's translator conveyed, their multifaceted eyes fixed on Elena. You claim this symbol was created without knowledge of Zyron physiology or cultural values? Elena nodded. Yes, Ambassador. The interplanetary unity flag was designed over 50 years before humanity's first contact with any Alliance species. The Zyron's skin rippled through a series of color changes, too rapid for Elena to interpret. Then we are faced with a remarkable convergence of symbolic meaning across our species. The ambassador stated, this requires further exploration. The Zyron delegation formally requests a private cultural exchange with the Earth representatives immediately following this session. Elena felt a surge of relief. A request for private exchange was a diplomatic courtesy, typically extended only to species with whom closer relations were desired. The Earth delegation would be honored. Ambassador, she replied. As the formal session concluded, and the delegates dispersed for their specialized discussions, Dr. Wren approached Elena with barely contained excitement. Captain, do you realize what just happened? The Zyrons are now viewing our handedness not as a cultural affront, but as a fascinating point of convergent evolution. Elena allowed herself a small smile. Let's not celebrate prematurely, Doctor. We've opened a door to further dialogue, nothing more. But as they made their way to the private meeting with the Zyron delegation, Elena couldn't help but feel that they had indeed transformed a potential diplomatic disaster into an opportunity for deeper understanding. The human hand controversy might yet become a turning point in humanity's integration into the galactic community. The private exchange chamber reserved for the Earth-Zyron meeting was more intimate than the Grand Assembly Hall, with adaptive seating arranged in a perfect circle to accommodate both human and Zyron physiologies. As Elena entered with her team, Dr. Wren, Cultural Attaché Garcia, and Communications Officer Leon, she noted that the Zyron delegation had already arrived. their tall, willowy forms arranged in what her cultural briefings had identified as their formal posture. The Zyron ambassador rose as the humans entered, extending all three of their left manipulators in a gesture that Elena recognized as one of profound respect, rarely shown to non-Zyrons. "Captain Maris," the ambassador's translator conveyed, "your presentation has prompted much discussion among our delegation. We would like to understand more about this convergence of symbolism between our species." Elena nodded respectfully. "We are equally intrigued, Ambassador. Such parallel development of symbolic meaning across species that evolved on different worlds raises fascinating questions about the universal nature of certain concepts." She gestured to Dr. Wren, who activated a holographic display showing archaeological findings from Earth's history. "If I may," the historian began, "I'd like to share more evidence of how the left hand has been symbolically important throughout human history, despite our right-hand dominance." The display shifted to show ancient cave paintings, ceremonial artifacts, and historical documents. Dr. Wren guided the Zyrons through a curated tour of human hand symbolism across cultures and eras, highlighting the recurring significance of the left hand in contexts of trust, peace, and sacred ceremonies. "While everyday tasks often defaulted to the right hand due to our neurological wiring," he explained, "many of our most meaningful gestures and symbols deliberately employed the left. The Boy Scouts' left-handed handshake, for instance, originated from the practice of holding one's shield with the left hand. To extend that hand was to deliberately lower one's defense in a gesture of ultimate trust." The Zyron delegates' skin shifted through patterns of blue and green. Colors that Elena had learned indicated thoughtful consideration. "These parallels are indeed remarkable," the ambassador acknowledged. "Among Zyrons, our heart center, what you might call our soul, resides beneath our left manipulator cluster. To offer this side in greeting, or to use these appendages for sharing food, is to literally expose our most vulnerable aspect to another being." Elena nodded. "While humans don't share this exact physiology, many of our cultures independently developed the concept that the left side is closer to the heart, both literally, as our heart is slightly offset to the left in our chest cavity, and figuratively, as a symbol of emotional truth. Yet your species predominantly uses the right manipulator," another Zyron delegate observed. "This appears contradictory." "A product of our neurological evolution," Dr. Wren explained. "But notice how this biological constraint led to a fascinating cultural development. We elevated the non-dominant hand to special symbolic status precisely because using it required more conscious intention. When a predominantly right-handed human chooses to extend their left hand, they are making a deliberate choice that overcomes their natural inclination." The Zyron ambassador's skin rippled with rapid color changes that the translation system couldn't quite interpret. After a moment, the ambassador spoke again. "Captain Maris, we have a request that may seem unusual. Would you and your delegation consent to participate in a traditional Zyron trust ceremony? It would involve food sharing using only the left manipulators." Elena exchanged glances with her team, receiving subtle nods of encouragement. "We would be honored, Ambassador," she replied. "Though I must warn you that some of us may be rather clumsy with our non-dominant hands." The ambassador's skin flushed a warm orange. "That clumsiness, as you call it, is precisely what would make the gesture meaningful. Among Zyrons, to risk appearing unskilled for the sake of honoring another's traditions is considered the highest form of respect." At the ambassador's signal, Zyron attendants entered carrying a ceremonial serving vessel. The container held what appeared to be small, luminescent fruits arranged in a spiral pattern. "These are katha berries from our homeworld," the ambassador explained. "The central ritual food of our truth ceremonies. The tradition requires that they be taken with the left manipulator and consumed whole." Elena nodded to her team, and they arranged themselves according to the ambassador's instructions, forming an alternating circle of humans and Xyrons. Each participant was to take a berry with their left hand and consume it. Then, speak one truth about their species that they believed was important for the other to understand. As the ritual began, Elena watched her human colleagues struggle with varying degrees of success to manipulate the small berries with their left hands. Dr. Wren, she noted with amusement, was particularly awkward, nearly dropping his berry twice before successfully bringing it to his mouth. When her turn came, Elena deliberately slowed her movement, using her left hand with careful concentration to select a berry from the central vessel. The fruit had a delicate, almost papery skin that seemed to pulse with inner light. She placed it in her mouth as instructed, and was surprised by an explosion of complex flavors, sweet and tangy, with an underlying note that reminded her strangely of Earth cinnamon. As the fruit dissolved on her tongue, she felt an unusual clarity of thought, which she assumed was either a mild, psychoactive effect of the berry or simply the focus induced by the ceremonial atmosphere. "A truth about humanity," she said, meeting the multifaceted gaze of the Xyron ambassador. "We are a species defined not by our consistency, but by our contradictions. We are capable of both tremendous cruelty and boundless compassion. Our history is marked by cycles of conflict and reconciliation. Perhaps our most enduring trait is not any single characteristic, but our capacity to recognize our flaws and strive to evolve beyond them." The ambassador's skin shifted to a deep, resonant blue as they absorbed Elena's words. When they spoke, their voice seemed to bypass the translation system entirely, resonating directly in Elena's mind. Another effect of the Cathaea berries, she assumed. "The Xyron truth. We fear your species' rapid adaptation more than we would ever openly admit in diplomatic circles. Your biological constraints should limit you, yet you transform them into cultural strengths. This pattern makes you unpredictable in ways that both fascinate and terrify us." The honesty of the statement was startling, and Elena felt a profound shift in the energy between the delegations. This was no longer merely a diplomatic exercise. It had become a genuine exchange between fundamentally different forms of intelligent life, trying to understand one another. As the ceremony continued around the circle, each truth shared seemed to build upon the previous ones, creating a tapestry of understanding that transcended the formal diplomatic language they had been restricted to until now. When the ritual concluded, the ambassador's skin had settled into a steady pulse of deep indigo, a color Elena had never observed in their previous interactions. "Captain Maris," the ambassador said, once again through the translation system, "I believe we have misinterpreted your species' handedness. What we perceived as cultural arrogance appears instead to be an example of how humans navigate the tension between biological reality and cultural aspiration. This is illuminating." Elena inclined her head respectfully. "And we have gained a deeper appreciation for how fundamentally different evolutionary paths can lead to surprising symbolic convergences. Your reverence for the left manipulator, as the protector of the heart center, resonates with human traditions in ways none of us could have anticipated." The ambassador extended all three left manipulators in a formal gesture. "The Xyron delegation withdraws any concerns regarding human hand dominance patterns. Furthermore, we would like to propose a joint cultural research initiative to explore other potential areas of symbolic convergence between our species." It was more than Elena could have hoped for, not merely a resolution to the diplomatic tension, but an opening for deeper cooperation. "The Earth delegation enthusiastically accepts," she replied, carefully extending her left hand to meet the ambassador's manipulators, in what she knew was an unprecedented cross-species gesture. As they completed the formal agreement, Communications Officer Leon discreetly showed Elena her datapad, displaying the latest headlines from the Alliance news feeds. "Earth Xyron breakthrough. Hand controversy leads to cultural exchange initiative. Left hand of friendship. Humans and Xyrons find common ground in symbolic convergence. Alliance observers praise human adaptability in diplomatic resolution. Elena allowed herself a small smile of satisfaction. What had begun as a potential diplomatic disaster had transformed into a triumph of cross-species understanding. The human hand controversy would now be remembered not as evidence of Earth's unsuitability for alliance membership, but as an example of humanity's capacity to turn biological constraints into opportunities for connection across the stars. As the formal proceedings concluded and the delegates began to disperse, the Zyran ambassador approached Elena privately. "Captain," they said, their voice pitched low, for only Elena to hear. "There is something our cultural databases recently uncovered about your interplanetary unity flag that I find curiously meaningful." "Oh?" Elena responded, intrigued. "The particular shade of blue used in the background. It matches almost exactly the ceremonial color of Zyron heart-binding rituals. And the specific gesture of the hand, with the ring finger slightly more extended than the others, mirrors our own gesture for truth beyond words." Elena felt a chill of wonder run through her. "That's remarkable. The flag was designed long before human contact with any alliance species." The ambassador's skin rippled with a pattern Elena now recognized as their equivalent of a contemplative smile. "Perhaps the universe contains deeper patterns of meaning than either of our species has yet discovered. A comforting thought, is it not?" As Elena watched the ambassador glide away to rejoin their delegation, she considered the profound implications of their exchange. Beyond the diplomatic victory and the cultural understanding gained, they had glimpsed something more fundamental: the possibility that certain symbolic meanings might transcend the biological and evolutionary boundaries that separated sentient species across the cosmos. It was indeed a comforting thought. The final banquet of the conference was a dramatically different affair from the first, where tension and formality had dominated the opening dinner. Now, there was an atmosphere of genuine camaraderie. Delegates from various species mingled freely, exchanging cultural observations and personal stories with a warmth that seemed to transcend their physiological differences. Elena, stationed near the entrance to welcome late arrivals, watched with satisfaction as humans and aliens alike engaged in animated conversations. The hand controversy that had threatened to derail Earth's diplomatic standing had instead catalyzed a new level of cross-species understanding. "Quite the transformation, wouldn't you say, Captain?" Dr. Wren commented, joining her with a glass of synthesized wine in his hand. "Indeed," Elena agreed. "Though I still find it remarkable that something as seemingly trivial as hand dominance could have escalated into such a significant diplomatic issue." The historian chuckled. "That's the nature of cross-species communication, Captain. It's never the grand philosophical differences that cause the most trouble. It's the small assumptions we don't even realize we're making." Elena nodded thoughtfully. "Like assuming that a biological trait couldn't possibly have profound cultural implications for another species." "Precisely," Dr. Wren confirmed. "The most dangerous cultural biases are the ones so deeply embedded in our worldview that we don't even recognize them as biases." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of the Varda ambassador, her crystalline exoskeleton shimmering with iridescent patterns that Elena had learned indicated pleasure or satisfaction. "Captain Maris," the Varda greeted her, "I must commend your delegation's handling of the handedness discussion. It was instructive for all Alliance members." "Thank you, Ambassador," Elena replied. "Though I must admit, we were fortunate that our interplanetary unity flag provided such a perfect symbolic bridge." The Varda's crystalline structure shifted in what Elena recognized as their version of contemplative thought. "Perhaps not mere fortune, Captain. The Varda believe that certain symbolic patterns recur throughout the universe, not through mystical forces, but through the convergent evolution of sentient minds grappling with similar existential questions. An intriguing philosophy, Elena noted, and one that seems supported by the unexpected parallels between human and Zyron hand symbolism. Indeed, the Varda ambassador agreed. Which is why the High Council has approved a new research initiative on cross-species symbolic convergence, to be jointly led by Earth and Zyron scholars. The news took Elena by surprise. That's quite an honor, especially for a species as new to the Alliance as humanity. Your handling of this potential diplomatic crisis demonstrated precisely the qualities the Alliance values, the Varda explained. Not the absence of cultural differences or misunderstandings, but the capacity to transform such challenges into opportunities for deeper connection. As the Varda ambassador moved on to greet other delegates, Elena caught sight of Communications Officer Leon, making her way through the crowd with evident purpose. "Captain," Leon said as she approached, "I thought you'd want to see this immediately." She handed Elena a datapad displaying an official communication from Earth's central government. As Elena read the message, her expression shifted from curiosity to astonishment. "They've approved it," she said quietly. "The proposal to modify Earth's official diplomatic protocol." Dr. Wren raised an eyebrow. "The left-handed greeting initiative?" Elena nodded. "Beginning next month, all Earth diplomats will be trained in ambidextrous formal greetings, with specific emphasis on left-handed protocols for cultures where it holds special significance. A small change with profound symbolic importance," Dr. Wren observed, "proving once again that humanity's greatest strength is not our biological adaptations, but our cultural flexibility." The evening progressed with increasing warmth, culminating in a series of cultural performances from various member species. The human delegation had prepared a special demonstration of traditional dances from Earth's diverse cultures, each highlighting the symbolic use of hands in storytelling and emotional expression. As the conference drew to its official close, the Zyron ambassador requested the floor for a final statement. The tall, willowy being stood at the center of the chamber, their iridescent skin glowing with a warm, golden light that bathed the assembled delegates. "Distinguished representatives of the Alliance," the ambassador began, "we Zyrons came to this conference with concerns about Earth's readiness for full integration into our community of worlds. The question of hand dominance, while seemingly minor, raised larger questions about humanity's capacity to truly understand and respect profoundly different evolutionary perspectives." The chamber fell silent as delegates listened intently. What we discovered instead was a species whose very contradictions, between biological constraint and cultural aspiration, between historical bias and forward-looking inclusion, make them uniquely suited to the challenges of interstellar cooperation. The ambassador extended all three of their left manipulators in the formal gesture of highest respect. "The Zyron Confederation formally endorses Earth's petition for advanced standing within the Alliance, with all the responsibilities and privileges such status entails." A murmur of surprise rippled through the assembly. Advanced standing was typically granted only after decades of provisional membership. Earth had been petitioning for this status for years, with limited support from the established Alliance members. "Furthermore," the ambassador continued, "we propose the adoption of the human interplanetary unity flag symbol, the left hand against a blue background, as an additional emblem of the Alliance itself, representing our commitment to finding unity across biological and cultural differences." The proposal was met with a spontaneous display of approval from many delegations, the Varda's crystalline forms glowing with intense light, the Marians' hydration systems bubbling energetically, and other species demonstrating their agreement through their own physiological expressions. As the formal proceedings concluded and delegates began making preparations for departure, Elena found herself standing before the large display of the interplanetary unity flag that had been installed following her cultural presentation. The blue background with the brown left hand had taken on new significance after the events of the conference. "It's remarkable, isn't it?" Dr. Wren said. joining her in contemplation of the symbol. How a simple question about dining etiquette could lead to such a profound diplomatic breakthrough. Elena smiled. Perhaps that's the most important lesson from all of this. In cross-species relations, there are no trivial questions, only opportunities for deeper understanding. She extended her left hand toward the flag in an unconscious echo of its imagery. This symbol was created to represent humanity's reach into the stars. Now it may become a bridge between species with vastly different evolutionary histories, but shared aspirations for peaceful coexistence. The left hand of friendship, Dr. Wren mused, extended across the cosmos. As they turned to leave, Elena caught sight of the Zyran ambassador, watching them from across the chamber. The ambassador raised all three left manipulators in a gesture that needed no translation. A farewell between not merely diplomatic counterparts, but beings who had glimpsed the possibility of genuine understanding across the vast evolutionary distances that separated them. Elena raised her own left hand in response, no longer feeling awkward or uncoordinated in the gesture. It had become natural through practice and intention, a small but meaningful adaptation that symbolized humanity's readiness to evolve beyond their biological constraints for the sake of connection with other intelligent life. As the Aegis prepared for departure from the Alliance hub, Elena stood on the observation deck, watching the sprawling space station recede against the backdrop of stars. What had begun as a potential diplomatic disaster had transformed into one of humanity's greatest triumphs in interstellar relations. The human hand controversy would be remembered not as evidence of Earth's unsuitability for the galactic community, but as the catalyst that demonstrated humanity's unique capacity for cultural evolution and symbolic bridge-building across species boundaries. Elena smiled as she gazed at the interplanetary unity flag, displayed prominently on the deck, the blue background representing Earth's oceans, the brown left hand extended in a gesture of peace and trust. A symbol created for humanity's journey to the stars had become something greater, a shared emblem of connection across the biological and cultural diversity of the cosmos. In that moment, the universe seemed a little less vast, a little less cold, not because the physical distances had shrunk, but because the chasms of understanding between fundamentally different forms of sentient life had begun to be bridged. One small cultural question at a time.